Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Chew. I'm Pastor Robert. This is the place where we ask this question. Are we choosing the way of Jesus, or are we choosing our own way? Today we're going to be looking at the way of Jesus involves details. Our foundational passage, Exodus 36, verses 9 through 13, God gave very specific instructions about how the curtains were to be made. I mentioned Noah yesterday and the construction of the ark. God gave very specific instructions. Have you ever considered God's call and instructions to Gideon? You'll find his story in Judges chapter 6. We read about God's call on his life. In verse 15, there's a conversation between Gideon and an angel of the Lord. And Gideon says, "Pardon me, my Lord. How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least of my family." Kind of sound familiar? David was the least. Moses didn't think he was capable. Well, Gideon is no different than anyone else. He's a common man, and God has pulled him out. We talked about God using normal people yesterday. There's details in Gideon's story that we need to pick up on, and we need to understand that God is looking for Gideon to follow his instructions. In verse 16 of Judges chapter 6, we read this. God says, "I will be with you." Now what follows is a request of Gideon for God to prove, if you will, that it's God who's talking to him. So God gives him a set of instructions, things to do, and he does those. And then God directs him to take his dad's last bull, or not the last bull, I apologize, but to take a specific bull, the one that's 7 years old, for a sacrifice. He's to tear down the altar made to Baal. He's to cut down the Asherah pole. Then he's to build an altar to God. He's to use the Asherah pole for the wood for the altar. Then he's to take the bull and sacrifice it as a burnt offering to God. God pays attention to the details, and Gideon did exactly as he was told. Now I want you to think of this experience as a training ground, because what God's really calling him to is to free Israel from Midian. In Judges chapter 7, we read again that God has given Gideon a task. First of all, God says that he has too many men. Gideon has too many men to go to war with Midian. The issue is God does not want Israel to claim the victory for themselves. So he gives Gideon instructions. Whoever's afraid, they can just go home. Well, all those who were afraid to die and afraid to go to war left. Gideon was still left with too many men. So God gives him a further task. He directs Gideon to take the men down to the water to get a drink. And there, the men who get down on their belly and lap from the water like a dog, God said, send them home. There were 300 men who knelt by the river, cupped water in their hands, and then brought their hands up to their mouth to lap the water, keeping their eyes up. 300 men is all God would allow Gideon to take into war with Midian, and God delivered them. God is all about the details. I'm telling you. Well, how about Jesus? The way of Jesus involves details. Check out, there's two passages in Luke chapter 9 and then in Luke chapter 10. In Luke 9, Jesus takes the 12 and he sends them out to heal the sick and to preach the good news. In verse 3, he says this. He told them, take nothing for the journey. No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, no extra shirt. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. If the people do not welcome you, leave their town, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. These are very specific instructions that Jesus has given them. Then in Luke chapter 10, Jesus sends out 72 in pairs to go ahead of him, to make a way for him as Jesus goes through preaching. In verse 4 of Luke 10, Jesus says this: "Do not take a purse or bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road." The rest of the instructions in this passage are very much similar to the instructions that we read in Luke chapter 9. Jesus tells us specifically in his word how to live our life of faith. His way involves details. We have to ask ourselves this question: are we following the way of Jesus, or are we following our own way? I pray that as you explore the passages that I've shared with you here today, you'll invite the Holy Spirit to give you eyes to see and ears to hear God's truth from his word, that you'll have a receptive heart and mind to receive these truths. And then, as the Holy Spirit leads you to correct things in your life, to follow the specific instructions and the details of the Holy Spirit, that you will do so with the same boldness, commitment, and courage of Jesus. I pray you'll have a wonderful day, my friends. Go in the peace of God. Blessings to you. Bye for now.